All right, so I do need to move on here into the juicy part, goals and strategies. Very simply, I like to think of goals as the what, who, when, where, why, and the strategy as the how. All right. Y'all probably sick of this one too. For those of you who've taken my classes for the last few years, SMART goals, SMART goals, SMART goals. Make your goals SMART. Make them specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. I say this like every single class. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm gonna start quizzing you guys. What is a SMART goal? It's setting real numbers with real deadlines. It's making sure your goal is trackable. It's working towards a goal that is challenging but possible. It's emphasizing how your project is significant within a specific community, culture, period of time, etc. And you're giving yourself a deadline. All right. So, like for example, someone was saying in the chat, Betsy, about being careful in this country. Some of my stuff is political and way out of sync with this locale, and I need to break geographical barriers. Maybe your audience isn't in the United States. That's totally fine. Maybe your audience is somewhere else, but you are kind of touching on this issue of relevancy. Is the stuff that you're talking about in your newsletter relevant to your readers? If it's not, they're not going to read it. It's the same thing when you're applying to grant applications. If you're applying to a grant and your work is not really relevant to what the grant does, like the people, the foundation who run the grant, or it's not really relevant to what's happening in the times right now, you're probably not going to get that grant. This is a big, big problem with funding, is if your work is not relevant, people aren't going to buy it. It's not just about being unique, it has to be relevant. All right, so your strategy, your how, can also be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. A really good strategy also includes a competitive advantage. What will you do differently than your competitors? Now, I use this term competitor, but I do want to like pause and say, I do not consider other artists as competitors. Yes, technically they are. If I'm selling art, if they're selling art, technically we're competitors. But I would much rather live in a world where we're colleagues or we're supporting each other. Like when I have a theater production, I'm also encouraging people to go see the theater production at the theater house right down the street, right? That is the world I would like to live in. But when we're talking about marketing, this is the term we usually use as competitors or competitive advantage, right? But again, think about your art. Why should anyone buy your art? Think about your newsletters. Why should anybody read your newsletter? Especially when they get 100 newsletters already in their inbox. What's going to make yours stand out? What are you going to do differently? This just takes, honestly, research. If I were to pause here and be like, okay, think about this question, give me an answer, and then let's move to the next slide, that'd be really, really hard. The best way to do this is, as I said, read other newsletters. Think about what are the ones that stand out to you and why. What are the ones that you read and actually click on links and why? Okay, well, why are you invested in those? What are those people doing differently? And a lot of times it's not really about the design of it. It's like they don't always have to have like the fanciest images. Like a lot of really good newsletters are mostly text actually, but the text is interesting and I want to read it. Okay. So let's go a little bit deeper into strategy. Here is a really, really basic formula that you can use. And we will fill out this formula, a draft of it together, but that'll be after I give you an example. But let's just like look at this first. There are parallel goals and strategies happening here, and I want to differentiate the two. You have your first goal, which is my goal is to start a newsletter and or increase my newsletter subscribers. So I am curious, like real quick, how many people here actually already have a newsletter going on? You can say, yes, I do in the chat, or no. So one person, yes. Sweet, a lot of yeses. Okay, cool. And I'm curious, actually, can I go ahead and ask what kind of platforms y'all using? Are you using MailChimp? That part might not be as exciting for you all if you already know how to build a newsletter. So I apologize if that material is a little redundant, or maybe not redundant, but you're all like, I know this. Squarespace, MailChimp. Okay. Wix, 3 per month for free. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So y'all are kind of familiar already with that. Okay, so I might not spend as much time then talking about how to make a newsletter. I will still do that as we go through the checklist. But okay, so here your goal might not necessarily be to start a newsletter. It might be more about increasing your newsletter subscribers. And the reason why is to market your projects probably. That's like the main reason probably why to do that. But it could be just like a totally supplemental thing. It's something you do in addition to the actual things you're trying to make money from. This might be like, hey, here's a cool thing that I offer for free, for fun. That's totally fine. But I think most of us here, like Betsy, want to make some money. And so we want to increase our newsletter subscribers in order to make money. Okay. Now that's not a very specific goal. So we have to make that specific as well as measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound, smart. We want to make that a smart goal. And then we have to think about our strategy. How will I do this? So what is the strategy for telling people about your newsletter and getting people essentially to sign up? So we need to figure out that strategy. And that is something we touched on last week. And if we have time at the end of today, we can brainstorm a little bit more of certain strategies for getting people to sign up. But that was kind of a thing we did last week and not really the focus of today. The focus of today is really about this next step. I will spark interest and or maintain engagement in my newsletters. That's my goal. I want to do this thing. I need to make that smart. And I'm going to do that by offering readers blank, and that is going to be my strategy. So this is where we get into like making more quality newsletters, more effective newsletters that people actually want to sign up for, not signing up out of obligation, and that actually want to read because they're going to get the kind of content they want from it, hopefully. So, and again, this strategy can be very specific, especially, as well as, again, relevant, definitely should be relevant. And then also measurable, attainable, time bound, all the other smart acronym pieces.